The Good Garbage podcast has been brought to you by Pakka. Pakka has been creating solutions in the food packaging, carry, and service space. Pakka utilizes sugarcane residue and upcycles it into amazing products. Their latest offering is a compostable, flexible packaging solution for the chocolate and confectionery industry. The products are available in the Indian subcontinent and in North America now. Pakka is also building an end-to-end solutions for customers in the food service and delivery space. For any query, do email at connect@pakka.com, and Pakka is Pakka.
People talk about saving the planet. The planet is going to be okay. It's gone through devastation in the millennia since it was here. So the planet is never going to go away. For me, good garbage is extending human life.
Hello. Welcome to the Good Garbage podcast. My name is Ved Krishna. My primary reason for existence has been to find ways to leave our wonderful planet cleaner. We will be speaking with material innovators, creators, and propagators to learn from them how we can build for scale and towards a regenerative future. Their stories will help us answer the big question, what is good garbage? There are some people who leave you awestruck and inspired. Scott Segal, the founder of J&J Green Paper, is definitely one of those. His life, full of exploration, provides us with a deeply spiritual and philosophical perspective. China, training horses, growing tomatoes, and running Ironman races have led to him creating various innovations, ultimately leading to a barrier chemical based on rice bran oil. The product he produces today provides an effective barrier properties to paper while remaining compostable, toxin-free, and cost-effective. He is landing large orders from the likes of McDonald's, and we will see significant impact in times to come. Listen, learn, and enjoy. Hello. I'm so happy to have Scott Segal, founder of J&J Green Paper, today with us. Scott, you are fully aware of this, but it's the biggest challenge we probably face today in really getting into renewable packaging is probably barriers. So this will be a very exciting conversation for me and the listeners to learn more about how you're going about things in order to be able to get more long-term packaging in place. So thank you for coming on the show.
Great. Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. We're trying to enlighten the world about some of the issues that are going on and make some changes.
Super. And this is going to be an exciting conversation because the number of interactions I've had with different packaging people, this is something that comes up all the time, the barrier technology. But I'm going to start a little bit earlier than that. I know that you have some very early influences on farming from your dad. Tell us about growing up. Where did you grow up? What were things like that influenced you in order to kind of really take this head on?
We were raised to always think forward, never looking backwards, and understand. Like, I tell people that I must have been 6 or 7 years old, and my mother took me out on the front porch of our home, and she said, there it is. There's the whole world, and you can have as much of it as you want, or you can go back in the house and watch cartoons. And so it's sort of a very philosophical, esoteric view on life that you can keep moving forward and that change is inevitable. So you can be part of that change. And as long as you're looking forward and not looking backwards, then you have more clarity. And what I really mean by that is if you are spending, we have only so much time in our ability of thought process. So it compared to, like, say, a 10-ounce glass, it only holds 10 ounces of fluid. So if you're spending part of your ounces on yesterday or last week or last month, now you have less to look at today's opportunities. So I was raised to not think about yesterday and only use today's influence. And so when you do that, it opens up portals of other opportunities in life, and then your clarity is a lot better. I'm 63. I grew up in the 60s and early 70s with all the changes in our country. Um, my mother was an entrepreneur, very successful businesswoman. My parents were divorced, in the 1960s. My father went back to New York, and he was an executive, was at one time the president of Max Factor cosmetic company. My mother was a businesswoman. She had a very substantial size Arabian horse farm. We started a vegetable farm where we were growing tomatoes. So it was a very non-typical household. And my mother's belief was work. You work hard and you keep moving forward, and you, in essence, don't listen to all the outside noise. Follow what your instincts are, because we are instinctive. Everything is instinctive. But somewhere along the way, humanity became more non instinctive and more formal. So we go to school, we get educated, we have religion, culture, class, and we live within those boundaries when we are instinctive. And somewhere in that passage of time, we have negated a lot of those instincts. I mean, you hear it all the time, a woman's sixth sense, or you get a feeling at a red light, I shouldn't go, and you don't go, and somebody goes through the intersection. Those are real instinctive moves, just like the animal kingdom. And so I was raised to be more instinctive. And when you are more instinctive, then you actually see things that other people can't see, because their world has become so narrow. And I'm not negating education or culture or religion, but they restrict our thought process to a singular world, and it's not as horizontal. It becomes more vertical. And if you look back over history, all the great inventions of time and objects, they came from people that, and the term is thinking outside the box. And and it's almost in essence true, because that is the box. The box is our restrictive nature, and those that think outside the box, then they find things. But if everybody thought that way, everybody would see those things. So and that's really how it began from a very early age.
There's so many things that you've said, and I want to dive into a lot of them. And thankfully we have the time to be able to do that. So one is that, this idea of thinking outside the box. I used to have a sticker, and I should find one again, on my last water bottle. It said, think outside, there is no box. So I thought it was so brilliant, right? That just think outside, there is, you don't have to restrict yourself at all. And that's so brilliant, what you talked about in terms of the way your mother in particular brought you up. And interestingly, I had another episode that we just released actually with Ralph, and he's such an amazing person. And similar to you, he grew up raising horses and farming, and he still does that, which is so interesting. So I'm going to dive into that one first. Do you feel that that got you very connected to nature in some ways, and did that also influence your journey?
I think yes, it did. It did. I have a young girl. She came as an intern in our company, and I convinced her to take a gap year from college and come work full time for us. And last week she was in China with me, and I'm trying to mentor, teach her, and so we were in a courtyard of a facility, and there was this magnificent tree in the courtyard, and I said to her, "Tell me what you see." And she goes, "I see this beautiful tree, and the leaves are so unique, and the blooms, and the bark even has a different color." And I said, "No, tell me everything you see." And she said, "That's all that I see." And I go, "But what you're missing is that tree is nothing without the roots, because it's the roots that carry all the importance, but they don't get any of the credit. They're miles of roots collecting the nutrients in the water so that you can see those beautiful leaves." So, what I was taught was, you can't see the leaves until you can comprehend and appreciate the root system. Okay. And so farming, when I grew up as a kid farming and growing tomatoes, it's the same thing. You have a raw piece of dirt. So you have to have the ability to take that raw piece of dirt and see the harvest. Because if you can't see the harvest, you can't get to the harvest. And then everything that happens between the dirt and then the harvest. You got to sow the land, you got to plant the seed, you got to nurture it. I tell people, the grass is only greener where you water it. Okay, it's that illusion that the neighbors have less problems than us isn't true. Maybe they water their grass a little bit more than you water yours. So the more and it circles back because it's very philosophical, but it's also more real than non-philosophical. Okay, that the more you connect to nature and instinctiveness, the more you can see the root system. The more you can see the root system, the more you can nurture it. The more you nurture it, the grander your tree becomes. In whatever scope, personal, friendship, marriage, love, children, parents, business, society, the more you nurture the root system and know that it's the important factor, the more your tree grows. I mean, there's tons of adages. It takes a community to raise a child. That's the same thing. That's where these come from. Okay, and so I was raised that way, and I wasn't just spoken to about this. We were forced to learn this hands on. Okay, so on my farm when I grew tomatoes, for me it was the harvest was almost anticlimactic. I would go through the fields and look for the first sprouts, and then I'd look for the first blooms, and then I'd look for the first tomatoes, and then we would get ready for the harvest, and we could move things around, and it was an exciting part of the process. And when you understand all of those steps, then the harvest becomes a reality. Steve Jobs has a very famous quote that says, "The reward is in the journey." Most people look at the reward as the object. You know, I ran a marathon and now I have the medal. The medal isn't the reward. The reward isn't even the race. The reward is all the work and effort that it takes to get to the race day. Like I've been doing Ironman races, and when I first started doing it, my coach told me, "You're a winner if you get to the starting line." Okay, because it takes months of arduous training to be able to get to the starting line. So that's where the reward is. The reward is that you've accomplished all of that training, not the little medal that you get at the very end. And so it's the same with everything else. So you talk about the nature and the farming, that the more you connect to the basis that you are, the more your instincts grow. And the more your instincts grow, the broader your vision is. Because remember, the only difference between you and I and the mountain lion or the elephant is a redirection of some of those DNA strands. We're all made up from the same thing. So if the lion and the elephant are instinctive enough to know where to travel the Serengeti every year, or the penguin can circle the globe and come back to the same pebble, why can't you or I? And we can. We can. I've proven that. We can do that. We don't want to follow that because we've been taught differently. When you're a child, don't run with a knife in your hand, bite the candy in half, go to school, get an education, go to college, get a degree, get a job, buy a house, work all year, save money for a rainy day, retire. Okay, so we're taught all these lessons, and the more of those that we're taught, the less we use our instincts. So it is very much in sync with nature, with the oceans, with the trees, with the forest, with everything else. And as I say, and I teach this to people that work for me, the more you connect, then the smoother your path becomes. Okay, and then all these opportunities then fall into place. And opportunities is a broad stroke. Opportunity could be just meeting somebody and learning something that you didn't know before, that one day can come back and give you a benefit in another part of your life.
That's very profound. What's your, and I'm going to keep going on that tangent a little bit more because there is so much to learn here for me, and I'm sure those who will listen to this recording. So, so what's been your connection methodology? So, the deep, amongst the many things that you've said, one of the main ideas is the connection, whether it's to nature or energy or whatever you may call it. And you've been on this journey, you've got a few more years over me as well. So how has that evolved? How do you connect? What is your tactics for remaining connected?
Okay, so we've all heard the phrase, "You can't recork the bottle." Okay, and once the genie's out, the genie's out. And I read an excerpt from a book that a hospice nurse came out, and she said that her job was the last moments with people's lives. And she said they all had something different to say, but every one of them had one thing that they said together: they never realized the importance of time. Okay, and so if you take that phrase for a second, and how I'm going to explain the connection, you can't change what happened, you can only move forward. And it's sort of like this. I analogize life to an hourglass. At birth, it's turned over, and so every second grains of sand are dropping out. So there's a few finite parts to that. One is it's going to run out of sand, and the other is you can't put any of it back. Now, the real conflict in all of this is you don't know how much sand is in your bottle. So we go through life spending money that we don't have, or we don't know what the check. You get a paycheck and you balance I make X amount of dollars and I budget my month, so I know what to spend and what not to spend. But you will take your time and spend it as if you have an unlimited balance in your checkbook, your time checkbook. Okay, because you just do it, and you don't realize that you have a balance in that book. You just don't know what it is. Okay, and so what I've learned is that I know I have a balance. I don't know what it is. So I'm going to take every second of every day and I'm going to maximize it to its fullest. So I compartmentalize my life. Like I take things that are not as important, like I wear the same clothes. I sit on the same seats on an airplane. I don't change things that are not important. I don't want to spend the time thinking about what should I wear today, or which airline should I fly, and what seat should I take. And I've been in Hong Kong. I have an office in Hong Kong. I've been staying in the same hotel for 37 years. Okay, because those things, they consume time that I don't know how much I have, so I don't want it wasted. Okay, so now that circles back to nature. Okay, now you may or may not know this, but life started in the oceans, and really all of our life revolves around the oceans. Okay, well, the smallest microcosm in the ocean is the plankton. Everything feeds off the plankton. Okay, without plankton, there's no oceans. With no oceans, there's no humanity. Okay, now where does plankton come from? We got the chicken egg kind of thing. Where does the plankton come from? Well, plankton is the birth from the whale defecation. So a whale poops in the ocean and it spawns plankton. Okay, so no whales, no plankton, no plankton, no ocean, no ocean, no life. Okay, so now take that for a minute and run that through the gamut of the rest of our lives. So if you can appreciate the root system and know that it's there and know that it needs to be nurtured, it's going to grow the tree. When it grows the tree, it grows the fruit of the berry. And what eats the fruit of the berry? A bird eats the berry, takes the berry, leaves the seed someplace else, starts another root system, grows another tree. So the more you connect to how the world actually survives and grows, the more you're actually connected to it. It's sort of like, you can put your ear on a railroad track and you can hear the train 100 miles away because the track is vibrating. So if you can connect to one tree, you can connect to all the trees. And if you can connect to all the trees, you can connect to all the oceans. And if you can connect to all the oceans, then you're part of that cycle of life. And once you're part of that cycle of life and you're not spending your minutes about what happened already that you can't change or can't fix or can't do anything with, what ends up happening is, and it's very esoteric, is that the universe opens up. And so I have found in my life that the more you connect to all that and disassociate with the all the noise and the minutia around you, then you'd be amazed at what you see. When this young girl was, when we were in China and I explained, talked to her about the root system and everything, she sat there for about 15 minutes and you could see the glistening in her eyes, like it was almost euphoric that she never realized how important the root system was to the existence of that tree. One cog can stop the wheel from going around. And as humans nowadays, we forgot that we're not part of the wheel anymore. We're part of a mechanism that's just running and running and running, and we're not connected. And when you're not connected, then you miss it. I mean, like, imagine if you took and you painted the windows on the side of your car and the rear view completely blacked out, not tinted but black, and you drove down the road, all you'd see is the pavement in front of you. If you have the windows clear, you see the pavement because you have to see where you're going, but all the beauty is on the side. And that's where you're going to see what life is all about. So, in a comparison to what we're talking about, that's what I mean. So, the more connected you are, the more you're looking out the side windows. And that's where you're going to see things that you've never seen before, even though you've driven down the same street every day of your life.
Yeah, two more things that came to me when you were talking about the journey and not the end. Again, very Eastern in philosophy. So the main text in Hinduism is the Gita, and Taoism is, of course, huge in China. And both of them are very similar in their thought process, and they talk about our. It's all about the journey. It's not about, and it's the joy in the journey. Sometimes I've been meditating for years, and many people would ask me, "What is your purpose from meditation, or what do you get? How can I benefit?" I said, "There is no benefit. The joy is in the meditation, and that's it. There is nothing more to be kind of philosophized from there. That if I meditate, will I be a better person? Sure, you might. That's a thing, but the joy is there in being present and listening to the birds and being aware of what is happening around you, like you said." The second part is very interesting. Again, you inferred to it in a different way. But the way I've seen it is that we are always working towards outputs. I should not be angry. I should not be lustful. I should not be greedy, but that's a consequence. It's the idea that you said about roots. What you have to do is water the roots. Are you eating right? Are you thinking right? Are you breathing right? Are you putting the right thoughts in your mind or instinctive in your mind? And then every output kind of takes care of itself. So those were things that I got reminded of.
Right, absolutely. I think part of that, to sort of elaborate, most people believe that they can control their everything that's going on. If you don't like the weather, carry an umbrella if you don't want to get wet, but you can't control the weather. You can eat healthy every day, you can exercise, you can not drink, not do drugs, and you can still die from lung cancer. Okay. Or you can eat, drink, smoke, not do anything right, and live to be 100 years old. Nothing is written in stone. Every seed that's planted doesn't sprout. There's reasons for all that. And those reasons are not within our ability to comprehend because we're not the maker of the reasons. Whatever belief system that you want to have, we're not the maker that says the whale poop makes the plankton. It evolved into doing that. So we need to accept that. And it's the only thing that's within our control is to make sure that we don't kill all the whales and so that we don't poison the oceans. But you have no control over any part of your life. And what my personal belief is, everything is an illusion. The only thing that is real are the seconds on your watch. That is real. It's going to tick every second, and it's going to stop working one day. The cars, the boats, the planes, the watches, the jewelry, the houses, the gifts, the metals, anything you want to throw out there is an illusion. It's there, it's gone. You didn't get it, you did get it, you lose it. They don't mean anything because it's sort of like it's a sense of accomplishment. But the metal isn't like at an Ironman. It's not the metal. The metal you show so that other people will see. Oh, I did an Ironman. But all of the joy, which there's not a lot of joy in doing an Ironman, but all of the joy, all of the journey of being able to get up every day and do what you're doing to get to that point of doing that. The medal is just a form of recognition. Okay, it's like a wedding band. You get married and they put a wedding band on your finger, but that's not the marriage. That's not the relationship. That just shows people outside of your relationship that you're married. So somebody came up with a symbolic way of defining marriage with a gold band. Okay, but that's not the institution of marriage. The institution of marriage is two people that decide they want to make a life together. They don't need that piece of paper or that gold band. But people think you'd have to have that because that's the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. There's just rainbows. So appreciate the rainbow, and then you found the pot of gold. So it is somewhat esoteric, okay? But I'll tell you that when we finish our conversation today and you go home and think about it, and when other people are listening to this, if you sit alone and close your eyes and talk to yourself without anybody around listening, you're going to find that it's a lot less esoteric and more realistic. Okay. We just tend not to accept that. That's why, we get up in the morning, man or woman, and we groom ourselves and put on makeup and get dressed and look in the mirror because we want people to look at us at a way we think that we want them to see. But that's not who you are. Who you are is the person before that. Okay. And those that appreciate you or love you or like you or do, that doesn't matter to them. So you see what I'm saying? It's all this illusion that we've come to come to live. And the more of those metals, makeup, clothes, cars, and all that become, like I say here in my office, you in business you have a persona. Same in life, you have somewhat of a persona. That's okay. The minute you start believing that you are the persona, now you've lost touch with the earth. In business, you have to have a persona because that's the nature of building or running a company or whatever you're doing. And even in a relationship, you have to have some kind of persona because if not, some of the kinks are there. But that's not who you are. And so it's okay. But if you start believing that you are that persona, like some of these famous people that they were living a life, and now that they're so famous that they bathe in Evian water because they want everybody to think that persona, they live the persona. That doesn't work in nature. The lioness waits in the grass for the herd to go by. She doesn't kill the first one, the second one. She knows instinctively that if she kills the first ones, she's going to weaken the herd and there won't be any antelope for them to hunt next year. So they wait for the weak, the old, and the sick to come at the very end because she's picking off the ones to feed her family so that her family will have antelope or wildebeest next year. Okay, that's instinctive. If they're hungry, why not grab the first one? We do that. We're hungry, we grab the first one. Okay, the animal kingdom doesn't do that. They survival of the fittest. They pick off the weak, the injured, the sick, and that's what they do. And that is to ensure longevity and the species survival. Listen, the lioness doesn't have some kind of instruction booklet or a degree on the wall from Harvard. Okay, so how do they do it? How can an animal in the wild figure that out? How can the penguin leave and come back a year later to the same spot. How does it happen? I mean, you and I can't get anywhere until we type an address into our iPhone with the GPS. Okay, but the penguin can get into the ocean and swim, circumnavigate the whole world, and come back to the same pebble on the beach. You and I can do the same thing. We have that ability. It's just a matter of letting go of your inhibitions or fears, as I call them, of what somebody may say or think, or the fear of falling and scraping your knee. I mean, when my kids were little, they're in their 30s now, I taught them how to ride a bike. Of course, they fall. So you pick them up and put them back on the bike. Okay. So you fall, you scrape your knee, get back on the bike. It's similar to that. But when it comes to some of these other real instinctive decisions, or doing things that are, like I say, outside the box, we don't want to do that. I just read a couple of weeks ago some billionaire quote, and he said, "It's amazing to me that people will not take 2 or 3 years of their life to do something for themselves, but they'll spend 40 years working for somebody else to get a gold watch."
The realities of life. How will we ever come to packaging? We have so much to talk about, but I am going to stay with two things, and then hopefully we go to the J&J side of it. But couple of things again that you said is one, this idea that people keep saying that, oh, you are helping the planet by doing whatever you do. I just find that to be such a so incorrect in some ways. All we need to do in the planet will thrive if we are just not there. So we are just trying to help ourselves survive, right? Because everything, humans go away, everything will start flourishing suddenly, and the balances that you talked about will again be achieved. That the lion will do their thing, and the wildebeest will do their thing, and the whales will do their thing, and the balance will come about. It's us that we have to kind of self-regulate to be able to do justice to this
Right.
beautiful
Yeah, we're,
planet.
we're extinguishing ourselves. We're not extinguishing the planet.
Yeah.
That's for sure. I read a few years ago that they did a study, I think at Berkeley or Stanford, and they said if man was wiped out 100% in 100 years, you wouldn't even see any of the buildings left. The planet would absorb everything that's here. So we're not destroying the planet, we're destroying humanity. So what we're doing is we're narrowing our lifeline by not doing these kind of things, because the planet will survive. We'll be gone, and the buildings will fall into the ground, and it'll grow again. It's done it several times, going back a millennium. Okay. And so we need to fix us, not fix the planet.
Super. I think that was a good movement towards fixing us and the work that you're doing. But before we jump into J&J, I know that you had numerous kind of careers, I would say. So there is the China side of you. What I'm told is that you've worked a significant amount of time in China, and then you worked
Right.
in property. So give me that part of the journey. What all did you work at, and eventually how did you arrive at J&J?
Okay, so I started farming, is what I did, and I was part of inventing a drip irrigation system in the late 70s. That in itself could be hours of conversation. And then from there, I sold out my interest in it. And then it's another, there's a bunch of these little crazy twists, in my life. When I was a kid, a little kid, my mom used to shop at a grocery store in Miami, and across the street from the grocery store was a place called Beige and Company, which became Prudential Beige, which became Prudential, which then was merged with somebody else. And so in those days, the stock would be like on a ticker tape going across a wall. So my mom would leave my brother and I there for the old men that were watching the thing to watch us so she can go to the grocery store. It was safer in those days. I'm talking about the 60s. And I became fascinated with how the stock market worked. So when I got out of the farming industry, I wanted to be a stockbroker. I thought I wanted to get involved in it. But the bizarre part about that, in the early 80s, stock brokerage firms wouldn't hire you if you didn't have a college degree. I didn't go to college, even though I built a big company and I was doing millions of dollars of business and sold out. They were fascinated, but they couldn't hire me. And so one Sunday morning when my wife and I were at breakfast, she found this little ad in the paper about a startup brokerage firm that was looking to bring some people on. So I went, talked to them. There was 3 owners and 1 employee. And so I got hired by those guys to build a company, which I did. I built it. We ended up with 9 offices and 600 brokers working for us. And while that was, which was another really interesting thing, because after I did that and built this company, all those other brokerage firms that wouldn't hire me started calling me, offering me jobs. The irony of life, okay? And during and now as a skip back on my mom's farm, she had a gentleman that used to come down every weekend and ride dressage. I don't know if you're familiar. Dressage is like the ballet of the horse world. It's the rider and the horse in sync, and they almost dance. It's beautiful to watch. I mean, if you look some of that up, you're going to be amazed. And my mom had a fellow that used to come down. He was in his 90s at the time, and he would ride dressage on her farm. And I became friendly with him, and he was one of the developers of sugar refining. And so he started talking to me in the 70s about how he taught the Chinese government how to refine sugar. And I came home one day and I told my mom, I'm going to go to China. And she said, you can't go to China because it's a communist country. Only Nixon can go to China. I said, but I'm going to go one day. And so fast forward, when I was running this brokerage firm, and I got a phone call one day from a headhunter who said that there was a fellow that owned an investment bank, and he was doing business in China and was interested in hiring me. Well, that was the key to that door. I met with him. I left the company I was at. I joined him, and he took me to China the first time in 1986. And I was, it was home, and he had some incredible political connections in China. And I worked for him for 2 years. And then in 1990, I went out and started my own company. And I've been in China, well, on my own ever since then. I raised a little bit of money. They call it from the street. I did a private placement, raised a little bit of money. I started investing. I owned equity in manufacturing plants and real estate development. And it sort of grew from there until the financial market crash. And then I got caught up in that with some investments, and 25 years of growth was like just about everybody else was washed away. And I was in essence starting my life all over again for the most part. And as I was doing that, that's how this started. I was living in a condominium building, and we had pizza on a football Sunday. I take the pizza box down to the recycling bin, and it was filled with pizza boxes. And so I had this concept of, wait a minute, pizza boxes have never changed. If I can figure out how to make a greener pizza box, maybe I can get back on my feet a little bit faster. And that's where it started. I had no concept about the polyethylene and the barrier coatings and how it works and how it doesn't work, and it started opening doors. I went from the pizza box, which I found out that 3 billion pizza boxes a year are used in the United States. And I was amazed and almost shocked to find out they all end up in landfills. And I didn't know why. And then when I was doing that research, I found that, well, they're coated in polyethylene. I didn't even know what polyethylene was. And then I found out that 60 billion coffee cups a year end up in landfills in North America because they're coated in polyethylene. And that was it. It just sort of, my mother used to say that I was probably a badger in a previous life, not a human, because when I focus on something, like that's all, I'm most obsessed with getting it done. Everything I've ever done in my life has been, I don't have moderation. Either I don't do it or that's all I'm doing 100%. So I started the process of trying to figure this market out. And the first thing I did was I started making paper myself. I started learning how to make paper. I wanted to make paper without any kind of chemicals in it, because my thought was, oh, I'm going to make a coffee cup. I even implanted flower seeds in the paper, because I said, oh, you can drink a cup of coffee, throw the cup out the window, and come back next week. There'll be a little flower growing, and I was making paper, but it needs a barrier, because if you pour water on a piece of paper, if it doesn't have a barrier, it goes through. And that was the real task. But then, over about a 2-year period at home, in my little office, I keep this like a grease board, chalkboard, and I write all the notes. I don't sleep much. It's one of the things. I sleep 2 or 3 hours a day, so I spend a lot of time reading and studying and making notes. I have all these thoughts that I'm dealing, so I keep all these notes, and then I sort of piece them together. So over about a 2-year period, I couldn't figure out how to come up with a barrier that would actually not be synthetic. But then, I mentioned earlier, my father was in the cosmetic industry, so I grew up around cosmetics. And what I realized, I had this epiphany: lipstick is all 100% petroleum. It's all oil, because it's a barrier. But then, in the last 15 or 20 years, cosmetic companies have converting to going organic. So I said, if somebody's making an organic lipstick, it has to have a barrier, because if a woman puts on a lipstick and it comes right off, she's not going to use it. So I started doing some research, and then I started reaching out to all the cosmetic companies I could find around the world that were making organic cosmetics, and asking them for data and information. So I started accumulating all this information. I was putting it on my boards. And then what I started doing is breaking them down to all the ingredients that were in them, and then buying all those raw materials in small quantities, and sort of like a mad scientist, blending and mixing and coating paper and pouring water on it, and seeing how it was. And then, like magic, one day I mixed a few of them together and poured water on the paper, and it beat it up. And so I knew I was onto something. So then I formed a bunch of homemade cups, paper cups, with my paper, with no chemicals. I hand coated all of them, and I ran through a whole series of trials: hot water, cold water, milk, soda, ice cream, grease. Put dirt in it, put some out on the balcony, some in the freezer, some in the refrigerator. And I did this for several weeks, and it worked. And then the work really began. It's not like in a 2-hour movie where you find something, you invent it, and then you make billions of dollars. That was now 2016 when it started to work. And so over the last 8 years, we have done. I say we, mostly the people that believe that there's a handful of people that were friends, and I convinced them to come work with me on this. They thought I was crazy, but they said we'll work on it, and we spent the last 8 years doing unsurmountable amounts of work. Like it's we've been told by some of the biggest companies in the world that we're now doing business with, that they're amazed at what we've been able to do. Non-educated, non-engineering, no experience, what we've been able to actually accomplish. And we've created the only barrier for paper products in the world that is 100% backyard compostable, biodegradable, has no chemicals, no polymers, no PFAS chemicals. Economics are incredible, the barrier qualities. And so we got the approval of Coca-Cola and McDonald's, so it doesn't get much better than that. And we did it. I'm not going to take much credit for that. I'm going to give the credit to where it really goes. But we did it. We're patented and filed in over 80 countries. We have the certification, USDA, FDA, global. We're the only product that falls into the criteria of what they call the SUPD, the Single-Use Plastic Directive, which is the basis of the European Union regulatory body for elimination of single-use plastic. We have 14 production lines that are going to be commissioned in the end of this year, January. When we're running those 14 new production lines, we're going to eliminate 3.6 million barrels of oil each year from going into making polyethylene. We're taking 3.6 million barrels of oil out of the earth. I mean, out of landfills, out of creating methane gas. Now, what they do with it is another story, but we're taking that away from that today is creating methane gas, PFAS chemicals, polluting the world, suffocating things. We're eliminating. That's our first annual, our first real year of mass production, and it's only going to grow from there. So, some of the things that we've been able to accomplish and the extrapolation of where it's all going it's remarkable. And I'm going to tell you that the people that have helped me do this have done the majority of the work, have a lot to be proud of.
There's an inspiration of mine who sends beautiful quotes, and one of his quotes was, "The honeybee is so designed that it's not really aerodynamic. The size of its body compared to its wingspan is such that it should not fly, but it doesn't know that, so it flies." So, so it's one of those things. So, where does this instinct of invention come? And you went back to your farming days and drip irrigation and that creation and that patent, because and you also mentioned that you didn't go to college, and so. So how did you manage to break that barrier as a person, and that instinct that I want to, it's okay, I can invent stuff, and how did that desire for creating something new germinate, and how did you nurture that?
It's very simple. And that goes, it sort of circles back to some of the things we said. When you don't have the fear of failing, then you can accomplish things, because we have hundreds and hundreds of failures. Okay. Somebody said something, I think it was Thomas Edison, that it didn't take him 3,000 failures to create the light bulb. It took him 3,000 until he found it. So, most people, what happens is they run into a stumbling block and they stop because they don't believe that they can get over it, or they have that fear of, well, how am I going to feed my family, or what are they going to say or think about me if I keep doing this? I've been told in the last 12 years we've been doing this hundreds of times, that even by my own family, that I'm wasting time. It's not going to work. If it could work, Dow Chemical would have already done it. You're wasting time. You're wasting money. Nobody. You don't know what you're doing. And I said, you're right. I don't know what I'm doing. But we're going to keep going. One foot after the other, and then eventually we're going to get to where we want to be, because we're just not going to stop. And we're not going to have that fear that it's not going to work. Now, we never knew that it would work, but we never gave up. And we used to do these calls on Friday with Coca-Cola and McDonald's people every Friday, and they've told me that they didn't believe us at the beginning, but they didn't want to not believe us. Okay, so what they did was they kept setting all of these things they wanted us to do that were way out of reach of ability to do, because they wanted to see how badly we were really going to try to do this, or if it really could work. So we would have the call with a couple of us, and they would tell us, oh, we need a study for the carbon footprint from cradle to grave of your product and compare it to polyethylene. And I tell them, okay, we'll have it for you next week. And then under the table, they'd be kicking me. And then we'd hang up the call and they'd say, how are we supposed to get that? We don't even know what it is. I said, I don't know. I don't know what it is either, but let's get it. Okay. And so then it became a challenge in here for us to do things. So we started getting that. But the interesting thing was, to get that answer, we had to learn a bunch of other things. So what we did was we said, wait a minute. If they're asking for this, maybe they're going to ask for this. So let's do this now. Okay. And what ended up happening is we accumulated this database. We've been told more than a dozen times by some of the biggest companies in the world, they've never seen such a comprehensive database is what we have. I was told by the president of Pactive Evergreen that I was doing a call with him, and he told me he called around to all his departments to ask them for some questions to ask me because they were almost embarrassed that they didn't even have any questions because anything that anybody could think of, we already had. He was duly impressed with how we were able to do that. And we were able to do that because we didn't know any better. You know, nativity sometimes is grandiose. All these PhDs and these chemical engineers, they were not looking where we were because they were only looking in the realm they've studied. A chemical engineer isn't looking for an organic product. He's looking for a way to change the polymers around to make it to simulate organic. We didn't know any better, so we went out and found organic products. We've been told that. Our patent lawyer, who was one of the lead patent lawyers at Merck Laboratory, told me when he was at Merck, they were trying to do this in their labs with all those $1 million PhDs, but they were looking in the wrong place, which then, as redundant as it may sound, goes back to our starting conversation. They were only looking at the tree, never looking at the root system. So they never could understand that the tree doesn't exist without the root system. So the minute you open your mind to the root system, you see the tree and the root system, and now you're more connected. And if you can see the root system, then you can see all the other things that feed the root system. Listen, I'm sure you've seen a sidewalk that has a root system growing through it. Think about that for a second. If you needed to move that sidewalk, you have to take a jackhammer and break it. But that root system can grow through that sidewalk to get to water. That's Bruce Lee. Be like water. Okay? So if you can comprehend the strength of that root system, that it's really the most important part of that tree, then you know what? Then you don't even see the sidewalk, just like the root system doesn't see the sidewalk. And then now all of a sudden you're seeing, well, now you know where the water is because the roots are going to the water. I'm doing some business in Dubai. And so a few weeks ago when I was there, we did like a little safari tour. We had some time to kill and we wanted to see. So we were out in the desert doing this tour and they told us, you know, the desert is a desert, but there is these little oases. So the Bedouins for thousands of years, they knew where the food was because they knew where the oasis was because that's where the water was and that's where the animals went. So they knew where to hunt, they knew where to drink, they knew where to put their tents. So it's the same thing. Why aren't we doing that today? Why aren't we? Obviously, you and I don't have to look for an oasis to find water, but the more we think like we have to find the oasis, then all those opportunities. Think about it. That's where the date trees were. That's where the animals were. That's where the water was. They could feed the camels. They could water the camels. They could feed their families. They could hunt with the falcons. It was all right there. All they had to do was find the oasis, which was easy to do. So it's sort of very symbolic, that cycle, that those that are more instinctive, it works. And it's the same thing with what we've done here. We let go of all those inhibitions. Like, I don't have to be a PhD in chemical engineering. I'm just going to figure it out. And we did. We put our, nose to the ground, or rubber meets the road, however you want to call it. And we dug around until we found things, and then we did it. And then we would talk to the PhDs, and then they would say, well, wait a minute. We never saw that. Maybe try this. And then they started helping us. And then it evolved from there.
Great. So moving from there, so you have this name J&J. How did that come about?
Okay. When I first started this and it looked like it was working, I have a friend of mine who said, I don't know anything about this industry and you don't know anything about it. So what you really should do is you should sort of create a website and put some information out and get some feedback and see, because in those days, nobody was talking about this barrier problem, the polyethylene in the environment. They were talking about the environment, but nobody really knew about this. So to have a website, I went to GoDaddy. They needed a name. So I needed to form a corporation, and my two youngest kids are Julian and Jade. So I said, J&J Green Paper. And so I formed a corporation I mean, I don't think anybody that builds a company, I mean, we all dream about, grandiose, but, nobody really knows that it's going to turn into, Jeff Bezos didn't know that his little, selling books was going to become what it is today. So it just stayed. It just stayed because, I mean, if we would have known all this was going to happen, we probably would have come up with a more clever name than J&J Green Paper, but it just sort of fell that way.
And it has meaning for you. And why Janus Technologies?
The Greek god Janus, mythological god, is leaving the old and entering the new. It's the two-headed god. We were trying to come up with a name for the product itself because I kept saying when we were having early phone calls, oh, the compound, and somebody told us like you need to call it something. So we sat around and we like, well, we need to come up with something that has a little symbolism to what it actually does. So leaving the old and entering the new.
You had a bunch of things that you could have gone in the direction of with the pizza boxes. Why moisture barrier? That's a very specific kind of focus and niche. And I see that coming from your personality too, and you said about your focus and your literal desire to do things.
We went from product to just barrier. So the barrier coating is really predicated by all these end users. And what has happened is everybody originally wanted cups and then boxes, and it's all over the place, straws and all these different things. And then people smarter than me said, wait a minute, you're very limited to how much volume you have as you're scaling. We can only scale so much because we only have so much money. And so what they said was, wait a minute, a coffee cup or a soda cup uses about 32 grams per square meter of barrier. A sheet of like this paper here, this McDonald's hamburger wrap, it only has 9 grams of coating per square meter. So we can cover a lot more mileage by doing the sandwich wrap than by doing the cups. So if we do cups, we can only do so many restaurants. If we do the wrap, we can do 4 or 5 times the restaurants. So we can cover more mileage and we can get more marketing benefits from it because there has to be a starting point until we, which of course we could never ever get to market share because currently today 40 million metric tons of polyethylene is used every year on paper packaging. By the end of 25, our volume will be a little over 300,000 tons. We're in some talks with some very substantial financial institutions that want us to grow much bigger, faster, obviously, because we have the clients and the customers that are breathing down our neck to get moving. But even if we had unlimited funds, we could never even get near, the market. So the powers that be, the people like McDonald's or Subway and all those kind of, they're like, wait a minute, we want to cover as much turf as possible. So let's go with the lowest grammage usage per item. And then maybe a year or 2 years or 3 years from now, you'll have enough volume that we could do a lot of different items. But so that's how it got to that. So our product is moisture, air, grease barrier protection. We do the French fry holder for McDonald's. So has great grease protection, great oxygen protection, and phenomenal moisture protection. And so that's why most of the product now is going for the sandwich wrap or fish wrap or meat wrap. They all call it something different.
And talk to me a little more about the technology itself. I see that it's from rice bran and that kind of thing. As much as you can kind of elaborate on what is the I understood, looking at the roots, finding where the barriers are in nature and bringing that in. But eventually, like you kind of, you laughed at this, there's a gap between creation and then scale,
Yeah.
So tell me more about, the structure itself on the raw materials and then the modifications and then how does it work with
Okay,
that?
so our product has several natural components in it. The bulk of it starts in from rice. And what we do is we take the husk, the broken rice and the bran, which is what's left over after they mill it. So when they harvest rice, they mill it, they take the rice, which we eat as people, and the rest that's left over, which is really a waste product. Some of it is being used for feed, to supplement feed. They use it as a filler for feed. The great portion of it in the world is actually discarded. And so what we do is we take that and we make an oil out of it, a rice oil, which is huge in India and is now growing around the world for multiple reasons. One, because they have found that it is healthier than all other vegetable oils. You can cook with it. They say that it has the health benefits of olive oil with the benefits of cooking. So it's becoming very popular around the world. It has been used for 20 years in India and in Japan, and now in China it is becoming incredibly popular, and it will be here in North America and other places too over the next several years. So, but when you make a vegetable oil, the first process is what they call crude vegetable oil. And in that crude vegetable oil, the process to make it edible oil is you have to remove what they call the wax from it. As an example, if you go home tonight and take the olive oil or vegetable oil in your cabinet and put it in the freezer, when you wake up tomorrow morning, there'll be a little film across it, and that's what it's like, a waxy substance that's in there. Obviously, when you have it at home, the majority of it has already been removed. If you don't remove it, you can't cook with it because it burns. So they remove the wax out of it, and then it becomes edible oil. That's the clarity in it. At the beginning, it's dark because it has the wax putty in there. So what we do is we make the oil, we extract that wax from the oil, we sell the edible oil into the market, we take that wax, and that's where the real process begins. It's a natural product, so it has an odor from the product. Our machinery, very sophisticated machinery that we engineered, designed. It took us 3 years to work with the engineers and to build it, to build the engineering platform and to make sure that it works properly. And through that process, we remove all of the color. We make it completely translucent. We remove all the oil. And at the end of our production line, we blend it with two other components that we buy, one mineral and one other natural component. We blend it, we pelletize it, we bag it, and then we deliver it to the people that are coating the paper and then making the boxes, the bags, the sandwich wrap, the straws. So we deliver that compound. No different than Dow Chemical delivers the polyethylene pellets. It's the same thing, except ours is not a chemical. So there's no PFAS chemicals, there's no polymers, there's no plastic, there's nothing in it at the end. You can actually, our product is approved by the FDA and the USDA for consumption. You can actually eat it. We joke a little bit. I joked with some of the people at McDonald's and said that the paper is healthier than the hamburger. It's a joke, but we get around like that with them.
Yeah, yeah. It's interesting. All the things that you mentioned have so much memory for me because, of course, I grew up in India and grew up around a lot of rice and rice husk. What we used rice husk for, and we still do in our industry, we buy over 80,000 tons of it, just the rice husk,
Right.
to burn in our
Right.
boilers
Right. Well,
for
they
fuel,
use it as an energy
as
source.
an energy source. But there were friends of mine who were making rice bran oil. And it's interesting that you mentioned today that it has good properties because what they were using it for was adulteration. They were using it to kind of take a vegetable oil and add some rice bran oil so that the cost goes down. And today you've come out with something inversing that idea that one, it is healthier. Second, it doesn't have to be sold cheap. You can actually get
Oh,
value from it.
yeah. And not only that, but what we've done is we've disrupted one industry and created another. So now the mills, as an example, that are milling rice around the world, they were selling that husk and bran to, say, farmers or other people, and they were getting anywhere from $50 to $200 for it. But now, if they take that and they make oil and we buy the wax from them and they sell the oil, that same 80 or $100 brand is now generating over $1,200 of revenue for them. So they're building these facilities to make oil, and now they're making money, and the return on investment for the facility is less than 2 years. So we've created another industry for people that are already doing this. And there's another couple little parts of this that are really fascinating, because ethanol gas is better than petroleum gas. But the problem is, to make enough ethanol gas, you take all the corn out of the food market. So it's a disruptive food market. Same thing with soy or canola oil, which is the rapeseed. Then you disrupt these edible markets. We don't take any of the rice. We take the waste from the rice. So the more rice there is, the more of the husk and bran we get, and we're not disrupting any of the food market. Rice is the only commodity in the world that every year goes up in volume, because the population goes up in volume every year, and it's a staple. It's the only product out there. So as the population in the world grows, the growth of rice is going to grow. So we're disrupting the polyethylene market, but we're increasing other markets, because now your mill, as an example, that was milling rice and selling the husk and bran for $80, now is creating rice oil, generating say $1,100 or $1,200 a ton, and they're employing people. And then what they're doing, the whole extrapolation of growth. Now there's people making the bottles, there's people making the cartons, there's people delivering the rice oil at the grocery store. So that whole method of growth, now starting from the JANUS compound, has created billions of dollars, or will be creating billions of dollars of peripheral industries and growth. And at the same time, we are helping humanity by saving some of the problems with the planet, or extending, as I like to say, extending humanity's life, because we're slowing down a certain portion of the PFAS problem, the recycling problem, the methane gas problem. And I'm convinced also that we're going to spark a revolution where there'll be other products like JANUS coming out that will start to absorb some of that 40 million metric tons. We could never do it. So if we end up with 1.5 or 2 million tons over the next few years, there's still 38 million tons that needs to be replaced. So other people are going to see, wait a minute, here's a market that has all this vertical movement that we can get involved in, and all these avenues for generating income with return on investment in a short period of time. The economics are there. Let's come up with another product. And maybe they'll find something that comes from seaweed or pine bark, or who knows, that works similar or better than ours, and we'll start taking up some of that gap. And eventually, my hope is that we can reduce that 40 million metric tons, obviously down to zero. But every time we do it, we're, like I said, with 300,000 tons of my product, we remove 3.6 million barrels of oil. So imagine if we got to 5 million tons. We take 40 million barrels of oil out of the dirt, literally out of the landfills. Okay. All right. All of that just is potential life strengthening for you and I and our kids and grandkids, and when we're gone, for who's left.
And every little step, like you talked about before, it's a step in the positive direction. So we have to keep taking those steps as we go along. And the other part of the circularity, again from memory, is that what was wasted in the bran oil process went into cattle feed. So it wasn't even that there was no waste, as far as I remember. And like whatever the waste fiber was, they would just put it into cattle feed, and it apparently sold and worked well. Um, just stepping into the technology a little more, what I read was that it kind of covers the fibers in paper. So does it work differently from a polyethylene?
Yes.
And how
Yeah.
does it? Yeah, what is that like?
Polyethylene is a film, like the sunscreen you put on your car window. It's a film, and the way that it is done, it's heated up, and then it comes out. They call it a curtain coat. So it comes out, the paper rolls, and it just lays across the top of the paper. So it's a film, and our product is not a film. Our product, the viscosity is different, and it's not a curtain. It's actually runs on the paper itself. And so it's then absorbed into the fibers of the paper. So what we're getting is we're getting increased wall strength compared to the polyethylene. And so what ends up happening is, as one example, we have a customer that does flexible packaging. And what they found with our product is that they were using 280 gram per square meter weight paper. They were able to go down to 240 gram paper and get the same end result as they got with the 280 because our barrier strength was greater. So they were able to have a box for their takeout food boxes just as strong with lighter paper. So what they're doing is they're saving 40 grams per square meter, which means that they're increasing their bottom line. That all that is profit. That's not savings, that's profit. And if you want to look at the other side of it, that's less trees that are being cut down and less water used. So that whole movement in there. So our product manipulates differently. Not only that, but when you're running a polyethylene machine, the energy that's used compared to the energy used for our product, we've done the calculation that a facility can use 18% less electricity and energy by coating with our material than with polyethylene. So that again has an extrapolation. That's profit for the facility, and it's also better for the environment and the people because it's less consumption of power, whether it's coal generated, like in most countries around the world, or water generated or nuclear generated. If you're saving 18% and of energy, there's a benefit to that, not just a monetary benefit. There's a environmental benefit to that as well.
So is it when you say it is added on to the paper? Is it mostly dispersion coating? Is it
No,
water based or does it?
the majority of the converters using our product are using what's called a squeeze roller. So it runs through a trough and then it is basically squeezed between some rollers. And it's sort of it's sucked up on the roller and then it is coated in that fashion and has a blade across there that they use for the measurement, for the volume of that they want on the paper.
Yeah, it's like a roll to roll
Yes.
structure
Right.
coating. Okay, that's wonderful. So if we look at the coating amount, say we were to achieve the same properties as a polyethylene or XYZ, something that's giving any kind of standard barrier properties, would the quantity used in case of a Janus coating be similar, lower, or higher in terms of the coat weight itself?
What we've found is that they're using the same volume product one for one, but in some cases they're able to, like I said, they're able to change the weight of the paper, but it still has the same GSM of coating on it, but the paper they went down in the paper, but they use the same coating weights, to set the machines up. Sometimes, like I said, they're changing the paper to go to a lighter paper, to be able to generate more profit for the operation and come out with the same result.
Have they used the product on the paper machine when they do surface sizing? Would you know that? Like just as a they normally why I'm mentioning this is the huge usage is also of PVOH and PVAs or starches in the coating process that is done on the paper machine before the paper is dry. So have they tried it there?
No, the all that's been done is at the converter, the coating machines. Some are doing it pre-printing and some are doing it after printing, but it's only done on the at the converters on the coating machines.
Yeah, that'll be another area to explore because I think that's a huge volume as well. Because the paper, a lot of these papers, like greaseproof, similar to what you are doing, a lot of the coating is done on the surface sizer, as they call it, or the
Right.
tour sizer. So those will be interesting if it can be done there. Then again, there's a further
Yeah.
advantage.
I think that what you're going to find is over the next year or so, we've been sort of in the weeds. When McDonald's came out with their announcement that they're putting it in their stores, it sort of added another layer of credibility to what we're doing. And when our new facilities become commissioned at the end of the year, into January, I think what's going to happen is like, we're sort of like they know we're there. They know the product works. We are in McDonald's, but there's still that cloud of doubt. Like, can we really produce the volumes that are needed? And I think what's going to happen is going into the first part of next year, we've answered the rest of the questions, and I think then what you're going to start to see is a lot more of the bigger operators in the world wanting to do some trial and error to fit more into their system. We've been working with some molded paper operators. They've been trying to figure out a way to make our product so they can mix it in the molding process prior to it. We don't have the R&D ability to do that, and we have some people that are working with us on that, because if we can put it into that process, then that's it. If they can put our product in the paper while it's being manufactured and molded, then you don't have to coat anything or spray coat it. It'll just have the barrier in there. So there's a lot of that. We've had conversations with BMW. They were interested in our product about maybe mixing it with some polymers and using it in the cars. We've had conversations with people that make the pill bottles, that little orange pill bottle and vitamin bottles, about replacing that with a paper bottle so that it can go into a landfill or in a compost pile. We've engineered and created the only paper can that can hold a carbonated drink. We're a few months away from quasi commercializing it. We're not going to commercialize it, but to work with people to do that, because I don't know if you know this, but in that aluminum can is a plastic liner. People don't know that, but it's
Wow.
filled with a plastic liner. So because aluminum is porous, so if you put the soda in just a regular aluminum can, it would leak out. But the problem they've had with going paper with anything that has carbonation is the expansion of the carbonation. So we've created one that sort of has ridges in it and it absorbs the carbonation. So sometime in 2025, we're going to be able to take that to the marketplace, to the canning companies around the world, for all the soda manufacturers, to eliminate those aluminum cans, or at least a portion of them.
That's huge, and there's so much of that. And I'm really excited about this possibility of others kind of co-creating a lot of different applications, because that's how something grows. So I think that's
Right.
great that you've opened that jar up, and there are different people experimenting, and who knows what will come out of it. One of the applications that has come up multiple times, and I'm sure kind of you've looked at it, and you mentioned it in passing on a heavier grade, is the flexible packaging side, and that's a huge challenge. Again, with the multi-layered structures that won't break down in any possible way. So, how do you look at, say, a potato chip bag, which is more long term? Do you think the product will eventually even go into like the moisture barrier properties like WVTR, OTR, sealing?
We have all of that and it works. And this is the shame about it. We only have so much volume. Otherwise, we could do all these products. And so the people that we're doing business with make a lot of those products. And what they're doing is they're putting it on the product that they can cover the most territory with. We can do bags, potato chip bags. We can do like the Pringle cans. We can do coffee cups and soda cups and straws and paper plates and all the flexible takeout packaging that you would get at Whole Foods or any restaurant. Our product can do all that. Okay, but we can't make enough of it. And we're really working very excuse me, diligently to grow that. Okay, and so we're sort of in between those stages where we have these very substantial financial institutions that are very interested in us, and they're waiting for our next step, that we can actually produce the volumes that we're getting to. Right now our facility is very small that we're producing it, and we're scaling in huge numbers. We're going from a manually operated facility to 14 production lines that are all completely automated, and the volume, our manually operated facility can do 3 tons a day. Our new production lines, each one does 75 tons a day. So I think they're sort of sitting, I don't think that I know, they're sitting back and just want to make sure that what we're doing, because it's new, There's no playbook for this. We had to create every part of this. Every step we've taken, we've had to learn and do it ourselves. And we keep winning these battles and getting things accomplished. They told us that it wouldn't have the barrier qualities. We got all the barrier qualities. That it wouldn't be completely recyclable. We got those certifications. That it wasn't biodegradable and backyard compostable. Then we got those certifications. Then they said it wouldn't coat paper. So we built it. We bought a coating machine. We modified it, and we coated our paper ourselves. And then when we did that, then they were amazed when we were coating paper. Then you couldn't print on it. Then we printed on it, and then you couldn't produce enough volume. So now we're producing enough. Who's going to put it in a restaurant? Then McDonald's put it in a restaurant, and they're like, okay, now the only step we have left to do is to prove that we can produce the volumes, because nobody can just use. Listen, if you started a business and a hot dog stand, you sell your hot dogs at the end of the day. If you want more, you build a second one and a third one, okay? Because you have proof of concept and it works. So we've proved all the concept except to produce a large volume. And the problem with that is once they use our product, they can't go back to the polyethylene. So they can't commit to doing the big scale until they know that we can deliver the big scale. Okay. And that's where we're sort of at right now, is that they're waiting for us to get our new factories up and running and working to show that we can do 200,000 or 300,000 tons. Because if we can do the 14 lines efficiently, we can do 140 lines, because it's a science. And that's why I said to you earlier, I'm really of the belief that early next year, when our 14 lines are rolling at 75 tons a day per line, and we're able to expand and fill more restaurants for McDonald's and Subway and all the others, that then there's nothing left for proof for the financial people. They want to see numbers, and they want reality. They don't want theory. They don't want engineering. To build a bridge across a river, you have to use an engineer. So, when they build the bridge, somebody tests the bridge before they put the cars on it. So it's sort of like that. The engineer knows it's going to work, but the average man doesn't. Like when they built the first bridges across river, they took an elephant and in the 1800s, and they walked the elephant across the bridge, because they said if it can hold the elephant, it can hold the carriage. Sort of the same thing with us. They know the product works. We have all the certifications. We have all the legal opinions. It's in McDonald's in a small scale. They want to know that we can produce large volume. And when we prove we can produce a large volume, then it's going to be like the last scenes in Trading Places.
So that's yeah, and I think you're right on when you talked about the larger companies. One of the big challenges for them is, yes, they can replace a product, but if they cannot replace it at scale, it becomes a challenge for them. We were working with Unilever on their small shampoo sachets that they kind of sell at a large scale, but it's still a small sachet. But they need 16,000 tons per year for it. So that becomes a challenge for them. So tell me quickly on how did this whole McDonald's, the Arcos, there are those success come about? How did it happen? Because that obviously gives you a significant boost in what you can do.
Well, we've been working with McDonald's and Coca-Cola for years, and Arcos Dorados is the only franchise group from McDonald's, and the largest. They have, depends on who you talk to, they have anywhere from 5,000 to 7,000 locations in South America, and they own all of those. So everywhere else in the world, there's scattered franchise people. And the CEO of Arcos Dorados is a huge environmentalist. And so the complications that like McDonald's was having was, where do they put it first? Because if they put it in those restaurants in France, the Italian franchisee people were upset, or the UK ones. So what happened was Arcos, because they're one franchise that owns all of South America. So if we started in Argentina like we did, it didn't affect Brazil because it was the same owner. Whereas if we went to Paris like they originally wanted to do, then the franchise owners in in Naples were complaining, why are you starting in Paris? Why don't you start here? So it sort of worked out that way that we could start with them in one area and then grow from that area without the complications of other franchisees. So we started with Arcos Dorados. They're huge environmentalists to begin with. They own all of the countries in South America, all the restaurants in South America. And we started in their home turf. The CEO of the company, and the company is based in Argentina. And so we started there, and now we're rolling into Brazil with them because that's where they wanted to go next. And then we'll finish the rest of South America. And so it sort of it became a business decision more than anything, you know, a very thought through business decision.
One of the things that we've found in our journey, and many times when you enter it, you don't realize the power of the converter. So typically, what happens is that you may be able to convince, say, a McDonald's or a Coca-Cola that this is a great product and it works, but there is the intermediary, the
Right.
person who has to shift. And typically, they have again, they have their own agenda. In the end, they want to the money is between what they buy, their raw material, and what they sell to
Right.
McDonald's, and McDonald's typically will know what their cost structure is.
Right.
So, and the second part for them, the challenge for them is again, they're used to running things a certain way. You know, the polyethylene has been running a
Right.
certain way for years and years. So they don't want to tweak their machines so much. They don't want to get into the hassle of, of coming into a newer kind of product system because it hampers their production, for example. So have you reached that stage of that challenge, or have you overcome it, or it's still going to come as you go ahead?
It was a challenge for years. We couldn't get any of the converters to even help us run tests. We had to do it ourselves. But what's happening now is that the environmentalists, the people, the regulatory bodies are forcing companies to make a change. And so the converters, they don't want to change because why should they? But now they're being forced to. And so what's happening, and then once it's approved by McDonald's, so there's a little pressure from McDonald's, not a lot, but the converter is also under pressure. And what we found, like with the converters in South America, is once they learned how to run our product and they saw the benefit, all the benefits. Now what they're doing, because they're piggybacking off of McDonald's. Now what the converters are doing is they're going to all their other customers and they're selling to their customers. So they're getting ahead of this environmental issue. And what will happen is, one day the regulatory bodies are going to say, that's it. We're done. You got to change today or you're out of business. And so some of them are smart enough to sort of get ahead of the curve so that it doesn't happen like that. It's the story of success and failure in business. There's companies that didn't make change along the way, and now they're out of business. Okay, we read about it all the time. You get stuck in your antiquated way of thinking, and then next thing you know, you're gone. Your business is closed because the environment changed, the people changed, the consumption changed, or the regulatory body changed. I mean, look at the steel industry. Okay, I mean, there you go. Where is it? And look at the auto industry. In China they have 80 manufacturers making electric cars. Okay, I mean, it all came because Tesla figured out a way to make a battery. But what they're doing in China is they're putting charging stations. So you put charging stations all over the place. You can sell electric cars. I mean, it's a thought process, and you either go with the transition of life. Listen, it goes back to Darwin's theory. The finches on the Galapagos Islands. Their beaks changed to survive. Otherwise, there'd be no finches there. So we do the same thing. Or if you do the same thing, then you stay in business. If you don't, then you're gone.
Yeah, so what I'm hearing is the pressure from the regulatory side and the interest from the final customer can drive the converter, and that's how
Right.
industry needs to
Absolutely.
probably look at it. What
Right.
about food? So the other thing we run into all the time as sustainability oriented producers is the part of cost and pricing. So how are you seeing that part play? Because as much as people talk about, yes, we want a sustainable product, ideally they want it at the same price, and
They
plastic
do.
has had the chance to optimize that over the last 70, 80 years.
Right.
So and that includes the productivity, etc. So do you run into that, and how do you solve that?
We have always been asked that question, but our solution is that our product sells for less than paraffin wax, less than PLA, and depending on where in the world, either less or equal to polyethylene. So we don't have that issue. We're actually being offered huge premiums from people to sell it to them instead of sell it to the McDonald's people, okay, because they want it. And not everybody is so price conscious. McDonald's uses billions of items. So a penny here and a penny there is a huge thing. But, a chain of coffee shops that has 20 coffee shops, if they can market the fact that they have a product that is backyard compostable, they're already selling their product for $7 or $8 or $10. To pay an extra nickel doesn't affect them. It affects people like McDonald's. So we have huge opportunities coming to us all the time about how much are you selling it for? No, we'll give you a 25% premium if you'll divert it to us instead of sell it to the McDonald's people. So because we're more than competitive in price wise, even in against the equal markets, like I say, the PLA, the paraffin wax, and the polyethylene.
That's definitely a good problem to have, and I'm going to take this towards a closure. I'm looking at time, and I've taken a lot of yours. So talk to me a little more about. You mentioned these manufacturing partnerships, and a lot of them coming online. And I read, there's something in China and Malaysia and other places. How are you going about that, and how do you find partners? And part of the reason I also ask is most of our listeners are in the industry, in case they want to increase their connection to you, how would you go about finding manufacturing partner, and how does that relationship work?
We don't have, in essence, partners. My entire adult business life has been international. So what I learned early on is to be efficient and live 12,000 miles away is that you have to have a local partner who understands the culture, the government, the banking, the labor force and all that. So what we've done in China and Indonesia is we have found local manufacturing partners that have experience in manufacturing. And what we've done is we've structured local joint ventures where we own 80% of the joint venture. We give them 20% for what we call sweat equity. They're our managing partner of the day-to-day operation. They have 20% equity. We finance it 100% ourselves. We've done that. We have 4 facilities coming online this year in China with 14 production lines. We have a facility in Indonesia that will be coming online by the second quarter of next year with 3 production lines. We're going into Cambodia, Thailand, and Vietnam by the second to third quarter of next year. Each of the 4 facilities in China has a different local partner, and their role is to manage the facility on a day-to-day basis and to oversee everything and to keep us sort of in the cultural, governmental, local, knowledge of what's going on there and run it from there. We orchestrate everything from here. We have I think they call it an ERP program. We have a massive system with Oracle. Actually, Oracle asked us if we would do a video for them because we're the first company they've ever dealt with that built a system from the end this way. Most people build their systems for what their need is today, and then they grow. And what ends up happening is they get to a point where their system can't expand. And then they have a dilemma because they can't stop what they're doing. So then they have to build a second system and somehow link them together. What we did, which of course I got a lot of argument from my family and some of the people, is we went to Oracle and said, this is where we're going to be in 3 years. That's the system we want. And they're like, wait a minute. We spent an enormous amount of money. Jesseline, who works here, has spent the last year working with Oracle building it. We're actually about to go live in about 2 weeks. We have a system that's the same system that IBM has or Apple has, and we're not there yet, but we're going to be. So it's set up in that manner. And what they told us at Oracle was nobody's ever done that. That's what everybody should do that has a business that's growing. Okay. And so we know where we're going to be in a couple of years. And we didn't want to get to the point where our system doesn't work. Because when the 14 lines come on, we're going to be moving hundreds of containers a day out of our system going on a global scale, plus all the raw material coming in, currency exchange, invoicing, monitoring, tax returns, all of that has to be done. So we've set it up in advance. And so we have this massive ERP program that will be able, so our local partners are linked to that. So right from here, about 20 feet from where I'm sitting, is where Jesseline sits. She has this massive dashboard that the whole world is connected to. We can even tell you where every one of our containers, which we have a bunch on the water moving all over, where they're at in the ocean and when they're going to be. So we have a complete monitoring system. So next year, when we're operating in Vietnam, Cambodia, Thailand, Indonesia, China, we're going to be here in North America in Arkansas. We can actually run the day-to-day operations from here while our partner, our equity holding partner, is running the day-to-day operations, and they're in sync.
It's truly remarkable what you're trying to create, and I'm going to take it towards my final two questions. So, if you were to look ahead, and I see that you are looking ahead to say maybe 5 year horizon, what would an ideal scenario be for you? Like you can talk in terms of scale, in terms of this much tonnage, this much replacement, or any other terms you want. What does your 5 year vision look like?
This is my belief, okay? I think that by the next 6 or 7 months that somebody, and I use that term somebody, I mean some entity or something, is going to realize that we've accomplished all this, and then they're going to come in and take control. Because one of the issues that comes up all the time with all these end users like McDonald's is assurance of deliveries, and they want to keep growing. And the only way we can keep growing is to have massive amounts of money and manpower. And unfortunately, most businesses, they grow by 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 to 10. We went from 1 to 1,000 overnight, even though it hasn't been overnight. Okay. So the only way that we're going to be able to fit into the marketplace is to have for lack of a better word, a cooperative partnership with a major operator, whether it's a Dow Chemical or whether it's a huge hedge fund that has a bunch of auxiliary companies involved that can bring in a logistics company and a manufacturing entity and accounting and finance. I could sell right now, just based on orders that we have, intent, letters of intent, and wish list. We have a wish list from people. I can sell right now 1.5 million tons of the JANUS compound. If I had it to ship today, I could deliver it. So if you take that and you back that into actually making it, delivering it, paying for it, collecting for it, currency exchange, soft currencies, hard currencies, invoicing, containers on the water, ordering containers, we're incapable of those scales. So I am of the belief that once our first 14 automated lines come on and we prove that we can actually deliver those volumes, then somebody's going to come in, whether it's Wilmar, Robert Kwok Company from Malaysia, whether it's a Dow Chemical or Sumitomo from Japan, or some giant hedge fund is going to come in and say, okay, you got 14 lines, we can do 114 lines, and we have the management, we have the money, we have the resources to actually scale that in a manner that could be scaled. For us to do it, it would take us years just from the managerial and the logistical side. You can go to the FedEx office and drop off a box, and the box goes to Memphis and then goes to where it's going to go. It's a system. It's easy. But try to do that with, 175 containers a day that are going to 40 different locations. You got to order the empty containers, you got to load them, you got to get them to the port, you got to have the documentation and the clearance. It's a lot. I memean, we have the product, we have the customers, we have everything, every part of the recipe ready to go. And so, like I said, we're just coming to this last little stage to prove that our engineering for these big automated lines can actually do it. We're going to walk the elephant across the bridge. And once we walk it across the bridge, now they're going to build bridges over every river, because now they've proved that it can actually carry the weight.
Super. Lots of clarity there as well. My final question, what does good garbage mean to you?
Well, as I said earlier, people talk about saving the planet, and, the planet is going to be okay. It's just going to be okay. I mean, it's gone through devastation in the millennia since it was here. From fires to freezes to meteorites to who knows what else has happened. So the planet is never going to go away. For me, good garbage is, extending human life. We don't understand that all of these chemicals and all these things, what they're doing is, it's not killing the planet, it's killing us. And so what we're doing, besides the economic side of what we're doing, is we're doing something because we're going to find a way to reduce some of that. And there's a bunch of extrapolation how we're able to do that. The oil, the composting, the paper, we're eliminating PFAS chemicals from the marketplace, from at least from these usages. Okay, maybe they're going to do something else with it, but that's not my responsibility. So if I can extend the life of you and your family, it goes back to the thing I said about time. All you and I have really is time. And that time has a value. If I handed you $100 bill, you wouldn't throw it on the ground, but you'll waste 10 minutes of your day. And so if I can extend your life by taking 1,000 tons or 100,000 or 1,000,000 tons of chemicals out of the way, then you know what? Then my time adds some real value to it. I've accomplished something of true value. It's not the watch or the car or the plane. I've actually had some real value. So our way of thinking is, if we can do that, then we can clean things up, so we can help my generation, your generation, our kids' generation, and maybe along the way, some other people are going to say, "Well, wait a minute, they did it. I'm going to do the same thing." And so, maybe we can get some domino effect, and we can have a little bit more value there, and help some other people.
Beautifully said, Scott. This has been such an inspiring conversation. There was a while back that I read this book called The Monk Who Sold His Ferrari. And I can clearly see you are the monk who's inspiring and changing barriers. So thank you for being that monk and, just having this clear insight into how to live life, not just about how to do business. So thank you. And this has been a personally great inspiration for me. So thank you so much for agreeing to be on the show and sharing your journey.
Thank you. I appreciate it. As we say in the Iron Man, you're just one foot in front of the other.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you for listening to the Good Garbage podcast. Follow us on social media to never miss an episode. Links are in the description below. I'm your host, Ved Krishna. See you next time.